Presenting many images on one canvas can appear a little daunting, but with Photoshop Smart Guides and layers, it's fairly quick and easy once you've seen it done. Now, I like to create my own artwork to suit the project I have in mind. For example, what am I going to be creating the project for? It could be a large top quality print to be framed, or perhaps a small image for a slideshow. Then, what aspect ratio do we want? Do we use 3:2 aspect ratio that we get from many of our cameras, or do we choose 16:9, which may be better suited to screens and televisions? Or perhaps we even have a custom aspect ratio in mind. Whatever our choice is, whether it's to create a triptych or any other presentation that you want, with Photoshop layers and smart guides, plus one or two little tips and tricks, we can make things very easy. Now, these techniques are also a great learning exercise for those who need to learn a little bit more about layers, because we can start with just blank shapes. Images can be applied to the shapes using clipping groups. Now, this sounds all rather complicated, but I can assure you it's pretty easy. Now, let me demonstrate the process by making a high resolution triptych. We can create the artwork and we'll drop the images in a little later. Now, the image size I get from my Canon camera is around about 5600 pixels by 3744, and that's 3:2 aspect ratio. Just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, I'm going to assume that the images are going to be 3:2 aspect ratio, but they're just going to be slightly smaller. So let's say 5000 pixels by 3333. And if you get your calculator out, you'll find that that retains the 3:2 aspect ratio. Now, I'd like to make a start by closing down the image I've got on screen. We may need this a little later. And I'm going to go to the top left and choose File, New. We're going to create a new blank canvas. Now, I've already put the values in over on the right hand side for speed. I need to choose pixels, remembering that we want to produce our artwork as a portrait. So the height I'm going to use is 5000 by 3333. Just a reminder, this retains that 3:2 aspect ratio. I'm going to produce the color as black, but it's not essential what color we use, and I'll click Create. The next stage is to increase the canvas, because we've got to make space for the triptych, so we need 3 of these shapes on the background canvas. So we need to go up to the layer thumbnail and we need to remove the lock. Remember what we're doing here, we're just separating the image, in our case it's just a black shape, from the canvas beneath. Then we need to think about the size of the canvas we're going to create, and I think if we bring the window up on screen it's going to be a bit easier. So let's go to Image at the top of the screen and Canvas Size. If I untick the relative box and I bring this up as centimeters, there we can see we're looking at an image here 42 by 28 more or less. So we've got to think about what width and height canvas we're going to need. You'll notice that it's my intention here to keep my images virtually the size they come from the camera, and increase the canvas size to accommodate as many images as I want to produce. Far better to produce a high resolution piece of artwork, because we can always reduce resolution far easier than we can increase it. So how wide do I need my canvas here? Well, it's going to need to be at least 3 times the width. So if we're looking at 28, let's make things simple here and say we probably need a background of something like 90 centimeters at least. So let's try that. Let's put 90 in there. In the height, we don't want to triple that. We just need to add a little bit top and bottom. So let's just make this 55. We don't have to be specific here, because we can always add canvas later. I'll hit Ctrl 0 to fit that on screen. We can always add more canvas, and it's easy to remove canvas that we don't require. Now if you look up at the top left of the toolbox, you can see I've got the Move tool selected, and I'm currently hovering around the center of that black artwork. Now because we increased the canvas from beneath that shape, the shape is right in the middle of the canvas, but if it wasn't, and I click and drag to move it away, as I move it back you'll start to see those pink lines appear. There's one telling me the artwork is now right in the middle, and as I move it to the left it'll snap into position, so I can always know that this particular shape is foursquare in the middle of my artwork. But what I need is a copy of this shape, because we're going to need 3 of those to form a triptych. Now we know we can just hit Ctrl J and create a new layer or a copy layer, and we'll see that appear in the layers on the right hand side. But when we're doing this sort of work, there's an even easier way. If we just touch the Alt key, the cursor changes, and if I click and drag, well, you can see exactly what's happened. Then if I do that again, Alt and click and drag, there I've got 3 parts of my triptych, and not only that, the Smart Guides has produced the perfect gap between the one on the left and the center and the one on the right and the center. I think we need a little more space, but we can add that easily by going back into the canvas window. Let's do that straight away. Let's go to Image and Canvas Size. Now how much more do we want to add? Well, let's go to the relative section, so I can just say to Photoshop to add so many centimeters onto my canvas, and if I just leave the anchor point in the middle, it'll add equal amounts left and right. So for example, if I put 20 centimeters in there, it's going to add 10 on the left and 10 on the right. Because what I would like to do is to have a little bit larger gap between the 3 parts of the triptych. So what I'm going to do here is select the part I want to move. So if I want to move this square on the right hand side, we do know we can go to the layers and select it, but here's another nice shortcut. If I touch the Control key and click, look at the layers over on the right hand side. I can select any layer by just clicking around, and it's very convenient to do that, because once I've selected it I can release that key and I can just drag the image out to make a slightly larger gap between the two. Then I can move to the left hand side, hold the Shift, let's get this right, hold the Control key and click and select that one, and I can drag that out too. And there are the Smart Guides helping us to put the position absolutely perfect. And we've even got a little tab there that's come up to say that we've got 31.58 millimeters left and right. So there are the Smart Guides doing what they do best. So now we need to save this as a Photoshop file, make sure the work we've done is safe. We can worry about any excess around the outer edges a little bit later. Let's go and get an image and decide what we're going to place where. Now as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've opened up my koala shot. I'm going to drag the tab from the top of the screen, and with the Move tool selected, click, drag and drop that image into my artwork, and I can close that down. Now I've got to decide which of these 3 shapes this image is going to appear in. I think it can only be the center or the right, because the animal is looking from right to left. It wouldn't work quite so well over there. So let's choose this as a center picture. I'm going to drag it down my layers so it's sitting over the top of that center section. If I hold the Alt key and move my cursor between these 2 layers, you'll notice that they get clipped together. Now you'll also notice that we do have the animal quite tight in the frame, but there's space around him or her. So what we can do is bring up our free transform. We can do that via the Edit menu, Free Transform. Now you can see the size of the image I've got to play with, because the bounding box is telling me. So I can pick up a corner toggle and I can drag the left side into there. I can drag the right side into there. That's about as far as I can go. If I go very much further, I'm going to start revealing the black shape. See what I mean? So I need to go somewhere about there. I don't need it quite that tight, but as you can see, I've got a little bit of flexibility here, and when I'm happy, I can hit the tick on the options bar to commit the change. Now, as you can see here, I've opened up another image, and this one is going to be perfect for the shape on the left hand side, for the obvious reason the heron is looking inwards. So let's drag the tab out, click, drag and drop, close this down. I'll drag this above the shape at the top, and immediately I'll hold the Alt key and I'll bring into play the clipping group. Then I can move that into place. I think I need a little bit of size here. We can either go to the edit menu to select free transform, but Control T is a nice easy shortcut. Once again, you can see we've got a little bit of scope here, probably enough to do what we need to do. So there I've got that one nicely positioned. Well, you can see what we're going to do on the right hand side. Well, there we have the three images to form the triptych, but we can do something about the background now, I think. So we could pick up our crop tool and make sure you clear any values at the top of the screen, because what I want to do here is to adjust this. Let's drag it right the way out. I want to decide the thickness of the left and right edge, and I've got probably about 3 squares here, so that's going to look pretty good. So something about that is going to look nice. You can make this precise if you want to, and something like that, that's looking pretty good too. And at the top I'll come down just a little bit, and I'll allow just a little bit more space at the bottom and hit the tick to crop the image. Now we've saved the artwork as a Photoshop file. We could save this as an ongoing project too. Then we can think about what we're going to place as a background. I'm going to keep this simple because we've already looked at various ways we can colour and texturize a background, so let's not go over that again. Let's just go down to our new layer icon, drag that layer down to the bottom of the stack. I can rename these, as you probably know, not essential but sometimes useful. And I'll just flood my border with white, which is currently the foreground colour on the left hand side at the bottom of the toolbox, so Alt Backspace will do that. Now at this stage we're likely to have the 3 black shapes which form the triptych nicely saved as a Photoshop file for use in the future should we need it. And now we've got our border in place and the images into the shapes, we would save this as a work in progress. But what we could do then perhaps is we could, if we want to, amalgamate these two together. So we could just select them, as long as we've got the positionings right. Select or hold your control key, select the 2 layers you want to merge, right click and just merge those layers. Then we can do the next one, and finally the one on the left hand side. From here we've got lots of different ways we can go. We can leave these separate, or we could have put them all together if we wanted to, but I could select each of these in turn. Let's start with the one on the right hand side. We'll put a thin line around the outer edge, I think. Let's go to our stroke command here. There's the stroke ticked and selected. I'm going to choose black. We're using high resolution images here, so I'm going to want the inside of my image selected, and probably a size of about 20 pixels. That gives us a nice solid black, not too big, not too small. That looks pretty good. I'll accept that. And of course, once we've got that effect on that layer, we can place it on the others simply by holding the Alt key and dragging from one to the other. But from here we do have a number of options. If you think back to the technique we use for the block mount, we could apply that here. We could even apply the matte effect here by selecting the area around the outer edge of these images and creating that drop shadow. So we've got lots of different presentation opportunities. And when we do start to think about putting three images together like this, don't forget they don't always need to be exactly the same size. Imagine the center one as an oval shape. Imagine the center one as a slightly smaller oblong. There's lots of variations that we can introduce into our artwork.